Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School pregame show, the Knicks get away from their three-day hiatus, which is rare for how this season has gone. The Knicks actually get days off. And so they're going to play the Denver Nuggets, who come in with the best record in the Western Conference, one of the best records in the NBA, and the defending two-time MVP, Nikola Jokic. Joining me to talk about this matchup is Ryan Blackburn. He is part of Mile High Sports, the lead Nuggets analyst. He's also, now I'm going to actually ask you, Ryan, to say the name of the podcast. I think I got it right, but I'm an ignorant Yankee from the Northeast. It's That's the Pickaxe Roll podcast.
Yes, it's Pickaxe Roll. Obviously, the Denver Nuggets, the initial Maxi the Miner kind of logo that spawned from that. So figured, hey, let's get the Pickaxe name in there, and like pick and roll just made plenty of sense. So
it's perfect. I've said this before. My listeners have heard this before. I love the creative podcast names that I've found throughout this. There's a Clippers podcast called Clips and Dip that is just like so perfect. There's Vitamin C's for the Celtics that I love. I didn't get to collaborate with them, but maybe next season. There's the Jazz Kitball podcast that's out there. Yeah. So Knicks Film School looks kind of boring at the end of the day when we have
it's a great name though. I've known you guys for a long time, and when Kristaps Porzingis and Nikola Jokic were being compared, those were the days back in 2017, man.
Those indeed were the days, and oh boy, those days end pretty quickly. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to previewing this matchup against a Nuggets team that I'm trying to get the temperature on, because they've run away to an extent with the best record in the West. After the last couple of years where you're kind of recovering from the Jamal injury that derailed, at least from my perspective, any title hopes that you might have had. This season, you've been with him being back and relatively good health for MPJ and Aaron Gordon. And then you had this recent 4-game losing streak that might have sent off some sensors. So I will ask you, Ryan, how are the vibes right now in Denver amongst the fan base?
Well, we didn't know whether to record this one on Thursday or Friday, just depending on whether Detroit was going to pose any issues to the Nuggets, which I think that says a lot about where they are right now in terms of just the overall mentality of, hey, not feeling great about the situation, despite the fact that right before this 4-game losing streak that they were on, they had the biggest win of their season against the Memphis Grizzlies, where they basically clinched the 1 seed. Now, they've put that to the test over the course of this last week, based off of rattling off a 4-game losing streak that I don't think anybody really expected. But from being around the team, from being just kind of proximal to what they've been doing, it feels like they took their foot off the gas pretty quickly after that Memphis win. And everything that came out of that Memphis win from the Memphis side, I think it underscores just how big of a win it was for Denver on the Denver side, where it was basically the affirmation that they were going to be the 1 seed. And Denver is currently in the midst of a streak of about 9 out of 10 games against the Eastern Conference. So they've mostly taken care of the Western Conference schedule that they have. They have by far the most wins in the West. So it's not really a big deal, but it doesn't feel good. And I think we've seen that in the discourse online just as much as in the records.
So the records are fascinating because the Western Conference is this weird jumble of anybody that could make the play-in or be the third worst record in the conference. Your perspective as someone who really hasn't had to worry about, and this is just from the most recent games where I've had to talk to a Laker fan and a Clipper fan and a Blazer fan about that stretch from like 4 to 13. What has been your perspective of seeing how the Western playoff picture has looked? And I'm just going to ask, as far as you're concerned, as far as the fan base is concerned, who scares you out of the West that the Nuggets could potentially end up matched up against?
Yeah, it's difficult for us to figure out that as well, just because you don't know who you're going to play. You don't know who the ultimate play-in tournament mix is going to look like. You don't know who it's going to be in the 4-5 matchup. And I assume it's probably going to be a team like Phoenix, a team like Golden State. And both of those teams, obviously scary for Denver based off of the 2 previous losses that they've had in the last couple of years. But in general, the Nuggets have been at the top of the West since about December 15th or so. They've had the top record. It hasn't changed. It's been 3 months. Denver's gotten a little bit lethargic and apathetic in terms of their approach over the course of this last couple of weeks. But I do think that they've done enough to prove that they could beat any of these teams in the Western Conference, whether no matter what the matchup is. It could be a bad matchup for Denver. And I think that a team like Golden State, where you're having to chase around Steph Curry, or a team like Phoenix, where you have to chase around 3 elite pick and roll creators, is going to be tough. And they're going to have to figure that out. But there's no reason to believe that the Nuggets will be stopped just as much as any of those other teams will be stopped. And it really comes down to who the best player on the court is. And I think Nuggets fans feel like they have the best player in the Western Conference right now, and maybe in the entire NBA, just based off of all of the discourse that I keep referencing.
So you segued it perfectly. The discourse and whether he is the best player. I imagine you are tired of having this conversation, so I will allow you to have as much of the conversation as you'd like. I do want to get the Nuggets' perspective on this, though, because the Knicks have played the Sixers twice since I've started doing this pregame show, and I've gotten the Sixers side of this. If you could just so there's two sides of this, though, that I want to ask, because does it matter to you or to Nuggets fans if he wins a third straight MVP?
Well, to Nuggets fans, it's a little bit different.
Okay.
I think for Nuggets fans, we've gone through the ringer in general, where he's been called hey, it's racist for MVP voters to vote for him.
Right. And the toxic side of it is a whole different part that we don't even have to. It's coming from an ignorant place that just resorting to arguments that I listen. Is there bias potentially in awards voting? Yes. Does it apply here? Yeah. I'm not necessarily sure. But we don't have to go down that road. We could just talk about the two players.
I fully understand. And I think that Nuggets fans, the well has been poisoned a little bit in the enjoyment of being able to celebrate Nikola Jokic and what he has accomplished in a Nuggets uniform. He's clearly the best player in franchise history, on the verge of becoming a 3-time MVP. Obviously, Embiid, I think, has passed him in a lot of the odds over the course of these last couple of days. But it does feel like Jokic has been the best, most impactful player in the regular season over the course of these last 3 years. And now that we're in year 3 of that, it seems like there's a lot of excuses, a lot of reasons to drag him down, a lot of reasons to drag the Nuggets down in general. Oh, they're not playing as strong of a conference this year. Oh, Jokic's defense, yada, yada, yada. I understand some of these arguments. They are born from legitimacy, but they are also in a lot of ways just nonsensical in trying to tear down somebody else's guy and try to lift up your own. Look, I think that it's very possible that Giannis is the best player. He's probably the best player in the NBA. Jokic is probably the second best player in the NBA, and Embiid is up there. There's no doubt about that. In general, though, all of those guys are incredible, and nobody has to drag down each of those other candidates in order to lift up their own guy. I mean, the games are going to speak for themselves. The records are going to speak for themselves, and everybody is doing some historic level of production and efficiency and numbers and things like that. But in general, in Denver, there were no other All-Stars nominated in Denver. Aaron Gordon was on the verge. Jamal Murray probably started too slow to ultimately get there. It feels like the Nuggets in general are discounted, but they're also boiled down to just Jokic by a lot of the national consensus. And yet a lot of people are also trying to discount Jokic as well. And I just don't think that people can have it both ways. Either the team is really good around Jokic, or Jokic is just that spectacular that even without a guy like James Harden next to him, or Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, the Nuggets are still clearly the best team in the West right now. And there's no doubt about that from a record standpoint.
So I find it fascinating that you pointed out how good everybody is this year. In a different world, Jimmy Butler could be in this conversation. Dame could be in this conversation. I like to look at percentiles. I'm a big baseball fan, obviously with the hat that I'm wearing. And I look at this season kind of like if you were to say like, who's the greatest home run hitter, and like you have 4 guys that hit 40, but one hits 48, one hits 41, one hits 50, and the other hits 43. You could say the one that hits 53 is, or the one that hits 50 is the best, but I think we just have 4 really great home run hitters, out of all of that. And I look at the percentile, like like all of these dunks and threes, the clean the glass lists, like Jokic ends up at the top. And I do think something should be said for like, once you're in the 98th percentile and up, it's just kind of a tier that you're in. So that's at least my outsider perspective. And look, I think my guess right now is that it's trending toward Embiid. They've also played incredible basketball, and he's like the main catalyst of it. But to your point, I believe there's going to be a second Sixer that makes an All NBA team this season. So that is a point in the court of Jokic. I guess the other part of this that I'm fascinated by, like, is the focus of Nuggets fans much more on like, yes, these regular season awards do matter, but like we'd like to see this guy win a title. Like we'd like to see the playoff success follow, so that way he can start solidifying his legacy all time rather than just in the regular season,
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I think if he becomes 3-time MVP and then loses in the second round to the Warriors or the Suns, the slander is going to be unbelievable. It's going to be insane to have to listen to that from all avenues. And it's going to be, I feel like Kendrick Perkins, when he said what he said on ESPN, kind of opened up a Pandora's box in general of like some of the awful arguments, but all the rest of the arguments are going to follow. Like there's no doubt about it that everybody and their mother is hoping to slander Nikola Jokic at the end of the season because they don't believe in him. They don't believe in his game. They don't believe in the Nuggets. They think that everybody on this team is a fraud, and that's fine. Like Nuggets fans are waiting for that smoke. They want to, I think they want to face it. And there's some folks that would like to have an easier route through the playoffs, but there are also some folks that want to face off against all of these demons, whether it's the Lakers, who they lost to in 2020, or the Suns, who they lost to in 2021, or the Warriors last year. They want that run, and then they want to go see Philly or Boston or Milwaukee at the end of it and see if Nikola Jokic can lead the Nuggets to a title. And I think he can. I don't see any reason why the Nuggets couldn't do it, just based off of what they've done as a team this year, and also just having a great player and then having a great supporting cast. It may not be an all-star level supporting cast like some of these other guys have, but I happen to be a big fan of what Jamal has done this year and understand that like sometimes it's not going to be as great. Sometimes it's not going to be all-star, all NBA caliber, but I do think that Nuggets fans, they want the title more so than they want the MVP. There's no doubt about it. This organization has never seen, and this fan base has never even seen the finals, let alone a championship. So it's one of those things that everybody is starving. They know how important this moment is because you have the best player in franchise history in his prime.
It seems a lot like where Milwaukee was 2 years ago, where Giannis had already won his 2. There was some voter fatigue. Not to say Jokic didn't win deservedly so 2 years ago, but like Giannis had no chance of winning the MVP that season, and then he had to go out and prove it when he got to the playoffs. And it's where, look, we just did a Patreon pod, I guess, last week, where it was like the 10 most important players or the most need to win a finals players going into the playoffs. And we had Jokic as number 2 behind Durant, because the argument, I guess, could be made that Durant needs to like win one not on the Warriors. Although you could also make the argument Durant winning one with Chris Paul and Devin Booker would actually just add the same narrative to the conversation. Jokic winning one to kind of solidify. And look, I say this again from an outsider's perspective, but to validate the regular season accolades, I just like the conversation's different. If he does win the MVP and then wins a title, we're talking like, okay, is this guy top 15 ever as a result? So like he goes ahead of all of these other big men, the Ewings, the Barkleys, the like there's a Dirk conversation of greatest foreign player ever if he wins a title this year. So all of that is at stake. As far as the rest of the roster is concerned, so I've got all your lineup data on Cleaning the Glass up, and I see these Kentavious Caldwell-Pope numbers. I'm just assuming that he plays a lot of minutes with Nikola Jokic. But the Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray numbers, they're all pretty great as far as like the on-off is concerned. Who would you say is the second best player or the second most important player on the Nuggets this season?
Interesting. I think that Aaron Gordon's probably had the second best season in general, just because of the completeness of his game, how he complements Jokic on the defensive end just as much as the offensive end. But in terms of second most important and rising to the level, it's definitely Jamal. He's the guy who Nuggets fans know what he did in the bubble. There has been a little bit of skepticism in terms of his ability to replicate that after this injury and just being in general, just playing to that level that he once played at. And I think that he'll get there. I have zero reason to doubt that he will, just because he rises to the occasion in these playoffs and will be a very important part. But the fact is that whenever Denver kind of goes away from Jokic lineups, they have to have another guy who can step up and really lift up the team. Murray has not been able to do that. Gordon's not been able to do that. KCP lineups with the bench are actually reasonable, but I don't think that's going to be a playoff thing. Michael Porter Jr. is having a moment. I'm not going to lie. I know that sounds weird and it might be blasphemous to say in general, but Michael Porter's really having a moment over the course of this post All-Star break schedule. He's been great. So
I then have to ask the fallout that might happen if they don't. Let's paint the nightmare scenario. They lose in the second round to the Clippers or the first round to the Warriors. What is the pivot? Like, what do you get the sense around the organization? Like, is it a coaching change? Is it a major shakeup to the roster? Like, what is the offseason move if they get a third MVP out of him, or even just a second MVP along with the second place finish, and then despite being the one seed, they fall short in the playoffs?
Yeah, it's probably a coaching change first and foremost. Michael Malone knows this, I think. I think that everybody around the Nuggets knows how important this season is, and it's really difficult to pivot from where Denver is. Basically, they don't have a lot of assets. They've bought in a lot of these guys. They've paid everybody. They want to make sure that they keep this team around for the long haul. The easiest thing to do would be to change the coach. I think that Michael Malone's done a pretty good job this year. I don't see any reason why to really pivot away if he does well. But the fact is that the stakes are just so high that that's going to be the first hammer that kind of comes down. But after that, it could be trading Jamal. It could be trading Aaron Gordon. It could be trading Michael Porter. I think any of those guys then become on the table. I still think that Jamal's one of those guys that will continue to get better, just distancing himself away from that ACL tear. But he has had injury issues. And there's no doubt about it that if a third season in a row is affected by an injury issue, then people in the organization are going to start questioning. They're going to start wondering, what should we do with this situation? So that would be probably the first thing. Is Michael Malone probably gets the axe, and then you start looking at any of the supporting cast members to try to get better.
Who's the player that Nuggets fans have circled as like, this is the guy you go get to pair with Jokic?
Jimmy Butler comes up a lot.
Okay.
He's a guy who I don't know if that's actually even feasible or viable, or like if the Heat would be even interested in that at all. But he's a guy at 6'7", wing sized, can play on and off the ball, but can also lift up non-Jokic lineups. I think that would be pretty interesting for a team like the Nuggets. And they need as strong of defenders as they can possibly get. Jimmy, I know, is getting older and he has a bad contract in general, but he's still really good. Like there's no doubt about it. And he would be an interesting piece. I think I've seen both Porter and Murray as potential trade chips in that particular deal. But is there another name? No, not really. I think Nuggets fans, they want to believe that this is the group that gets it done. And I think everybody still believes that it certainly can get done. But if the most likely situation is that you don't win a title and then everything is on the table.
Interesting. There's no, and again, I'm asking this from an uninformed place. There's no like he could leave one day fear with Nuggets fans, right?
Not really.
Okay.
It's been like, I think that was an undercurrent before this most recent deal was signed. Jokic, after the first round loss last year, Game 5, he was asked post game, just right after being eliminated, and about the contract, about the Supermax extension. And he said, "If it's on the table, I'll sign it." And like, that's the implication of that, of course, is that, oh man, Denver wouldn't have offered him a Supermax extension. Like, yeah, they're definitely going to do that. There's no doubt about it. So he's going to be on that Supermax. He's got a player option on the end of it. So he's locked up for another 4 years plus a player option after this season. So they're still in it for the long haul. There's no reason to really pivot yet, but if he were to ask out, it would be horrible. One other name that I can't believe I'm saying this. Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic are really good friends. Like they're really good friends.
It's a name I thought you were going to say when I asked about that earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just bring it up and not say too much about it, because I mean, Luka is still he's still tied to the Mavericks. They still have plenty of time there. But if you're looking to pivot, if you're looking to try to get another all-star caliber player there, why not blow right past it and go get the next LeBron? That would be pretty cool.
That would be a thing to see, Luka and Jokic together in the league in their primes, no less. Okay, those are all my current Nuggets questions. I've got 2 more to ask you. Now, there's a jersey hanging over my right shoulder. Carmelo Anthony matters a lot to me. He matters a lot to Knicks fans, a certain portion of Knicks fans. I've yet to actually take the temperature of whether it's the majority or not. But I want to ask about Melo in Denver and how Nuggets fans feel about him. The obvious is that his number is not sacred because Jokic has it, and I don't see it. If it's getting retired, it's going to be once, and it's for Nikola Jokic. Is the relationship non-existent? Is there still ill will about Carmelo Anthony? How do Nuggets fans feel about Melo?
So the trade was 12 years ago now, like
2011. Yeah.
12 years is a long time. I think Nuggets fans are definitely slowing down in terms of the Melo hate and the I think everybody would like to move on from that in general. I know to follow up, how severe or how strong did that hate get? Well, he got booed every time he touched the ball, every time he came to the arena. When he was on the Portland Trailblazers back in 2021, he complained or just at least lamented the fact that he was still getting booed, despite the fact that he was in Portland and that the trade happened 10 years ago. But that's how strongly Nuggets fans felt about it at the time. It was a great team that they were a part of. And the ultimate reason why they failed in the last couple seasons was because of inbound errors against the LA Lakers, and then George Karl getting cancer in the last season. And then he requested a trade after that. And it was his prerogative to do that, but it was also a situation where the Nuggets, who are seen as a small market, mid-market kind of team, were being spurned by a large market organization and the bright lights and Lala wanting to go to New York. And there's a lot of, I think strong feelings about that decision by Melo and the fact that he never really progressed past the second round in New York. I also think Nuggets fans thought, hey, we were just as successful, if not more so, with you than the Knicks were with you. So why did you even choose to go in the first place? Was one of the major narratives that kept cropping up. So me personally, there was an opportunity for the Nuggets to sign Melo a couple of years ago. I didn't want to do it because I didn't think that tying 2 separate arrows together would be a good idea. And I think that a lot of Nuggets fans felt that way too, though there is a sect of Nuggets fans that believes that, hey, Melo, we love you, we appreciate you. And I think a lot of Nuggets fans in general, they understand the significance of what Melo did in a Nuggets uniform, and they would want 2 number 15s retired. That is something that would potentially be a thing.
How does the organization feel about that? Do you ever see that happening?
I think that by the time that Melo does ultimately retire, I think that he'll probably get his jersey retired, but not before Jokic gets his retired.
Okay. So one would have to happen for. So what's fascinating, though, is could it be like a Melo gets his number retired and then Jokic is the last player ever to wear 15 outside of Melo, that they both like, because Melo, for all intents and purposes, is retired at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't see in the next 5 years Jokic retiring. So if you want to coincide like Melo's Hall of Fame speech or Hall of Fame induction goes along with his, I imagine that's when the Knicks will do it, and then I wonder if Denver would do the same.
It's a good question. I would have to ask around in general, but it does like, I think Nuggets fans and the Nuggets organization do appreciate what Melo did while he was in the uniform. And they understand that, look, player empowerment, everybody gets to make their own choices. There's no doubt about that. But I think that everybody felt a certain kind of way for a while. And now that it's been a full decade since that move has actually been made, I think that everybody's probably willing to bury the hatchet now.
So then last question on this. There's a lot of discourse amongst Knicks fans about whether they won or lost the trade, whether it was an overpay or not. How do Nuggets fans feel about the return they got for Carmelo? I know that pick swap, which shouldn't have mattered in the first place, landed Jamal Murray. But the fact that that's really the one big takeaway. I know they had the 56 win season with Wilson Chandler and with Gallo and with that team. But for the most part, like, it was kind of the Knicks got the guy that led them to a 2 seed one season, and it was kind of even until the Jamal Murray element got added. At least that's my perspective. How do Nuggets fans feel about the return?
Yeah, I think we've seen the tree that ultimately has developed from all the pieces that Denver got from Melo. I think the Nuggets fans feel that they won the trade. I don't think that there's any question in their minds that based off of those moves, it helps set them up for years to come in terms of assets, in terms of players. Gallo and Chandler were also pretty big parts of the Nuggets organization for a while. Gallo in particular was he had some great moments in Denver, just some fantastic moments. He was one of my favorite players growing up for sure. And just like, it wasn't ever to the degree that Melo was, where he was really changing the franchise or anything. But I think Nuggets fans really feel fondly about that. It was a 57 win season, by the way.
Excuse me.
I just want to clear that up.
Important clarification. I appreciate that.
Franchise record 57 wins with the team that didn't have an all-star. So it was really cool. It was probably the most fond memory that Nuggets fans have had for the organization ever, outside of maybe the bubble. Like, the bubble really did change things for a lot of folks, but it was still one of those things where you get to celebrate, even though like it kind of came from some bad circumstances. So
does that 57 win season rank higher than the conference finals finish? For Nuggets fans? No.
Well,
okay.
They went to
not the bubble one,
finals.
Not the bubble one.
Okay.
The one against the Lakers. In 09.
I don't think so. I think that people would prefer 09 in general, just because of the way that the 57 win season ended was Gallo tearing his ACL in the third to last game of the season, and then getting rolled over by the upstart Golden State Warriors when they could have faced any other team and they probably would have been fine, but had to go face that team. It was tough. It was definitely tough, and I remember that pretty fondly in terms of, and it was great up until the point when it wasn't. I think that Nuggets fans, they're starved for playoff success now. So they would take the 2020 bubble run, and then they would take 2009. Anybody that was alive in 1984, 1985 probably would have taken those runs. But beyond that, the 57 win season, it holds a certain amount of respect and fondness for different reasons.
It's interesting. That's a 54 win season for the Knicks that year. That's the one season, honestly, this century that Knicks fans can point to and be like, see, it hasn't all been two decades of misery. At least I'm one of those Knicks fans that's like, yeah, they went 4-1 against the two teams that made the finals, 5-1 against the two teams that made the finals that year, had a 13-game winning streak in the second half of the season that made it look like they were title contenders. And then the supporting cast kind of failed. I say the supporting cast kind of failed Melo in the playoffs, but there are others that believe the star of the team failed in those playoffs. Do you remember those playoffs and watching, at least on the East side, your emotions watching the Knicks against the Pacers and eventually Melo like getting blocked by Roy Hibbert and that one I
don't remember that much. I remember more the losing in 5 to the Heat. I think the following season,
season before.
Oh, season before. Excuse me. But like there were like definitely. I think there were Nuggets fans that were taking solace in the fact that at least Melo wasn't doing well. At least in the season of misery for the Nuggets, it wasn't Melo who was benefiting from it. So, I mean, they like. It's a good point for Knicks fans to really be able to circle around it and to be able to enjoy. But I don't like that was really the birth of Paul George in that year, right?
That was that was the season we discovered Paul George, and then like the thing I keep running into is like, was anybody beating the Heat that season? I would have just at least liked to see that series because the Pacers took the Heat to 7. The Knicks were 3-1 against the Heat that season, including 2 wins in Miami, 1 without Carmelo Anthony. So this is all footnotes. Like the Knicks lost to the Pacers in 6, regardless of J.R. Smith forgetting how to shoot a basketball, regardless of Jason Kidd deciding he just wasn't like he was retired like months earlier before that playoff series. Regardless of the footnotes, the Knicks lost, and we'll never know what that series will eventually have been. Thank you for entertaining the Melo conversation with me. I personally appreciate it. Before we go, I like to get people's perspective on how the Knicks are doing this season. I like seeing outside of our little Knicks bubble, how the national conversation or perspective of the Knicks and what they've done this season. You were telling me a little bit before we started that you were shocked, or at least surprised, that the Knicks are doing this good this season. And if you want to elaborate on that, how's your view of what the Knicks are this year?
Yeah. Really what I was trying to get at with that was the Nuggets, when the Knicks faced them early on in the year, Julius Randle was having a great shooting game in that game. And I was very surprised at the level that he was shooting at in that game. Just from the previous season, those were shots that he was missing consistently. Those were shots that, like, the step back long twos, the threes that he's pulling up from 27. Like, it definitely felt like he was hitting some crazy shots in that game. And then Denver just didn't have Aaron Gordon or Nikola Jokic in that particular game, so they didn't have a good matchup against him. They tried Jeff Green. They tried switching on some smaller guys. Nothing just really worked. But in general, it's been really cool to see Jalen Brunson flourish. He's been fantastic. I don't know what the health situation is for him right now. Is he healthy going into the game tomorrow? So
the latest is, I'm going to assume he doesn't play, because I think he's had 9 days off since his most recent setback. This is an injury that it just, like, you need rest, and if you, the matinee of it all, the fact that this is a 1 p.m. game Eastern, that
we hate, by the way. Just letting you know, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Holy hell! Like, what are we doing here?
Counterpoint: as somebody who does post games for Knicks Film School, or at least then has to edit them into podcasts, the 10 p.m. Eastern starts for these games, which put me in bed by 4 a.m. as a result. It works both ways, but I empathize with the fact that your game day starts early in the morning. I always wondered that with, like, football on the East Coast with 1 p.m. starts, but, like, football starts at 11 or 10 a.m. the rest of the country. But I would guess he's not playing. There is also a world where he's fine, and the Knicks are like, yeah, Jalen Brunson's back. So this would be the earliest I think we could see him back.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about this Knicks team. I do feel like it's been a better collective this year than it has been in years past, where Emmanuel Quickley is really stepping up. RJ Barrett has been, I think, better in general as the season has gone along. Is that fair to say?
It depends who you ask. I think the fact that he can be the third or fourth or fifth guy on certain nights, and it's not like, oh my gosh, the guy we took third overall is our fifth best player tonight. Like, it's not a bad thing. He's finding his way as a role player. And then on certain nights, like when Jalen Brunson was out, he had a couple 30-point games, and they were important and helped them win, especially against the Lakers on Sunday. there's some efficiency stuff with RJ that is coming up as concerning, especially going into what will be year 5 next year. But overall, his step to, it's not a step back, but like his step sideways has not hurt them to an extent.
Yeah, and you got to give credit to Julius Randle for just stepping up to the plate when the team absolutely needed him to do it. Quentin Grimes now being in the starting lineup, I believe that's been great for you guys. Not having Evan Fournier, I'm still wondering what the hell that contract was. In general, it's nice to see them really pivot to a younger, more athletic team, as opposed to a team that's always trying to force feed veterans in there. But a lot of these young guys are strong defensively. Mitchell Robinson has been really good. Quentin Grimes has been really good. Having guys that really surround your stars and really accentuate what they're doing is going to be super helpful. I think the ultimate question for the Knicks, just from an outside perspective, is how do they compete at the highest levels? Are they going to have guys that step up in those moments? And when those stars do step up, do the role players also step up? Can everybody step up as a collective, or is it just going to be put onto Randall and Brunson? I still consider them probably a second-tier contender behind the top 3 teams in the East, but it wouldn't surprise me if they upset one of those teams. It's just, can you upset 2? Can you upset 3? It's going to be tough.
So I think they had this 9-game winning streak recently that sent all of us into some irrational worlds. After they beat Miami and Boston last weekend, I was like, so they're going to win every game for the rest of the season and then all 16 of the playoffs, right? But this losing streak they just had kind of put everything back into perspective. A version of this season that is a success is a 7-game series that is fought hard. It would suck if it's a loss to Donovan Mitchell after what this summer was, but if it just turns out that the team with the better player won the series, you accept that. The ultimate success is you get to a second round. And then if you get eliminated by Giannis or Embiid, you get eliminated by Giannis or Embiid. But I say all of that, and I believe they're 5-2. No, even better, 7-3 against the Cavs, Celtics, and Sixers this season. So they actually have played the top competition in the East pretty well this season, but regular season is a different animal. We'll see. As this last question, as this game is facing the Nuggets, are you expecting a win? Are you like the Nuggets need to win this game? Here's what I predicted: a 4-game win streak for Denver after that Toronto game, after that Toronto loss. And so obviously that factors in a win against New York. Yes.
But I mean, would it surprise anybody at all if the Knicks won this one when Denver, let's say they have a good time on Friday night and they aren't super pleased about going to have an 11 a.m. start, or it's a 1 a.m. start, or 1 p.m.
1 p.m. Yeah,
1 p.m. Eastern time. They might not play well in that situation. They might, but I honestly feel like the team has turned a corner in terms of, hey, that whole losing business, we don't like to do that. That's a pretty stressful thing when it comes down to all this discourse and all of this annoying stuff that you see everywhere. Let's just win instead. And they had a really good bounce back against Detroit, especially in that fourth quarter. It looked a little bit sketchy for a while, but I do think that Jokic does pretty well when he goes to the Garden. He's been really, really good in a lot of those games. And I think that a lot of this team, they want to show out in a game like that. And do they have a back-to-back the game after against Brooklyn, also a matinee performance. So maybe they go all out against New York and then rest a couple guys against Brooklyn. Maybe it's the other way around. We'll see what happens when this injury report comes down, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. I think this is probably a 50-50 game.
Who is what does the injury report look like? Who should I be wondering if they'll play with the Nuggets?
Well, if it's a back-to-back, then Jamal Murray is probably the guy that you have to be concerned about. He's also been dealing with a bunch of nagging injuries ever since the All-Star break, basically, which is kind of a concern given that it was the All-Star break and he had sat out, I think, the previous 6 games before that. So he's probably going to be a guy that pops up on the injury report, and whether he's on left knee injury management or something like that, and that is what it is. Also, I think that because Denver has this lead for the 1 seed, they may start resting some guys kind of occasionally down the stretch, and whether that comes down against the Knicks or if it's against the Nets on Sunday, I don't really know. It might be too soon for that. They might decide, hey, we're going to play everybody until we clinch. And if that's the case, then great. But we're just going to have to see.
I can tell you now, there will be many a Knicks fan that's very upset if the Nuggets play their full roster on Sunday, and then the team right behind them in the standings, the Brooklyn Nets, gets the B squad for their matinee matchup against the Nuggets. But so is life in the NBA in 2023. Ryan, you've been great. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Before you go, tell the people where they could find you and all your work.
You can find my stuff at NBA Blackburn on Twitter. I try to post YouTube content, articles, things like that. I write for milehighsports.com, and be sure to go subscribe to the Pickaxe and Roll podcast. It's a pretty good Nuggets podcast. I think I've done pretty well with it.
I love it. Love the confidence. This is like a moment, by the way, in Denver sports between like the Avalanche just won the title. Sean Payton just went to the Broncos. I know the Rockies aren't a thing. Like,
we don't talk about the Rockies.
But like Jan just went to Colorado. Like this is kind of a moment. Like with baseball aside, with what happened in the World Baseball Classic, like the Jets are about to get Aaron Rodgers, and the Rangers just got Patrick Kane. So like our cities are kind of thriving at the moment.
That's how weird is that teams in different sports in the same city can all thrive at the same time.
I know, right?
Who knew? Cycle like that seems crazy to think about, but it's been true. So hopefully we can both share in some success for some decades to come.
Yes, let's hope so. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me.